all right, I've got this family structure, but now what the heck do I do with it?
Let's get into that. Hey everybody, I'm Nate Warnock.
I'm Andrea Warnock.
You've caught us for Family Friday. This is a show that we do every Friday where we take a look at God's design for family, God's design for parenting, and practically how we can implement that design into our own families. So before we jump into this month's show and this week's episode, I just wanted to ask all of you guys real quick before we move forward, if you're watching on YouTube, if you will click subscribe down below in the description. So a little subscribe button, if you'll click it, that would subscribe you to our channel, and then click the bell next to it. That will let you know whenever new episodes come out so you can make sure to catch them. Also, if you are listening to us on Apple Podcasts, if you would like our podcast and leave us a review, that would be really helpful in helping other people to find our content.
Cool. So this month, we are talking about family structure. And we've talked about what the heck is that and how do I create a family structure and that sort of thing. So today, we're getting into what do I do with it now? Now that we know what it is and we've created what we want for our family to operate and move forward, how do we make it work now?
Right.
So we're getting into that today.
In 5 easy steps.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're just going to go through a few steps that we thought, hey, as we think about implementing family structure, here's how we go about doing this. You know, obviously this is kind of the drywall structure, right? So you're going to paint it and all of that your own because I don't know all of your families. Right. So, you know, this just kind of gives you an idea of, hey, this is what I would suggest that you look to do, and you guys customize it to your family. So you want to kick off with number one, maybe? Go for it.
So yeah, you have this, hey, this is how we want to move forward with our family. This is what we're about. This is how we're going to operate to line up with what we believe in and what we're about. Totally. So the first thing that you're going to do then, once you decide that, is talk with your family about it. Talk with the people who are living in your house. And we talked a little bit about, in the first week, I think, maybe that's not even just your family. Maybe you have other people living in your home for a time that aren't just your family. You're going to want to talk to everybody who lives in that home with you because you got to all be on the same page. And maybe not everybody operates by all the exact same rules, and that's fine. But talk with everybody about it. So get everyone together. You're going to talk about this is our, this is our code. This is what we're about, and here's how we're going to live our lives to reflect that. Right.
Yeah, so we talked quite a bit about code last week. We'll put that video right here where the I is, and so you can access that. But this is sort of the structure, the code upon which your structure is built. Right? Share that with your family. Talk about, here's the things that we want to be about as a family, and then talk to them about, we talked last week about how do we build house rules and the actual structure based on that code, right? Are you going to have curfew for your kids? Well, if the answer to that's yes, then that should be tied into one of those codes. If it's not tied into one of those codes, then I think you need to ask yourself, one, is curfew, does that even matter to us then, and why? Is it because everybody else does one, so we feel like we should do one? Or did we miss something in that code that needs to be a core part of what we do as a family? So once you have those things in place, now when you're sitting down talking to your family, talk to them about, hey, we're going to have a rule where we have a curfew. Here's why. Here's how this ties into what we're going to be all about as a family. It makes the rules part of family structure much more palatable for those that are going to come under the authority of that family structure if they understand, well, mom and dad aren't just fun killers. They actually have a purpose.
And it's not a dictatorship like, I'm just doing this because it's easier for me to say no all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, the other thing is, as we're talking, you may be thinking, well, I don't even have any kids yet. Well, please understand this talking with your family, I don't necessarily mean that happens immediately after you come to that code and those family rules that you talk about as a couple. That may happen years down the road.
Sure.
Right? I mean, you may have even revised your family code 3 or 4 or 5 times as a couple before you ever present it to anyone that's going to come under the authority of that code other than the two of you. Right? I mean, you may have a baby, and it may be 3, 4, 5 years before you sit down with that child and say, okay, here's what our family code is, here's what our house rules are, and how they relate to that code. So, and obviously, you might have a 5-year-old right now and a 2-year-old. So you might be talking with your 5-year-old as a family now, and talking with your 5-year-old, then 8-year-old, and 2-year-old, then 5-year-old when they get to that place. Again, so certainly this talk with the family, I killed that. I crushed it, honestly.
You did.
Let's call it a night. Let's pray it out. So, that's not happening. So, that's what we mean by talk with your family. And like Andrea said, you may have non-family member people that live in your home. I would also add to that, you may have people you need to talk about this with. See, I can do math, but not English. There may be people that you need to talk to about this that are outside of your home. Right? For example, maybe you have parents or siblings that watch your children for longer periods of time while you work, where you would want them to be in on, hey, I want you to understand these are the things we're making a decision as a couple to be all about. These are our code, and these are some rules we're putting into place in our home. We would love if you would respect those when our children are in your home.
Good point. Yeah. Okay, so what's the next step?
Yeah, so you've talked with your family, right? Now you got to do the stuff that you said you were going to do, right? I mean, and I'll be honest, this can be the most difficult part.
I know.
Right? Because for sure, particularly if you have children that are older and this is new for them, their gut instinct is going to be to bang up against one of those structures as soon as possible to see if this is really something that you're serious about. So that's step 2 of, we call it put it into practice, right? Step 1, talk with your family. Step 2, put it into practice. That means those rules that you've had, that you've set up for your family, put them into practice, right away. If there's going to be a curfew, it starts right now. If there's going to be, hey, if you talk back to your mom or if you speak disrespectfully to your siblings, here's what's going to happen to you. And it starts right now. You may be tempted into thinking, well, I need to kind of ease them into it because, they've never had this before. Don't fall into that temptation. Right? Yeah. Put it into practice right now and go. Right? You might as well rip the Band-Aid off straight away.
Yeah. And it may be difficult, but also put in a lot of love.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah, this whole thing, please understand, this whole thing should be surrounded in a conversation of love, because for, all of our families, you don't want them to think that you're just doing this to be a problem, right? You want to make sure that they understand that you love them and you're doing this because, 1, you recognize God's put them under your authority in your home, and 2, you want to raise them right because you love them.
Yep.
Right? How about 3?
Yeah, so then the next step is to not be a hypocrite, which seems like a funny step. But, just making sure that you're not doing a do what I say, not what I do sort of person. So in this, you're following the code too. You're following the outpouring of that code. So give me like an example of what it would be, because obviously we have bedtimes for our kids, and that fits into kind of who we are as family, but we don't go by those bedtimes. No, but this is an important distinction. We don't have bedtimes because part of our family code is our kids need to be well rested. We have bedtimes because part of our family code is your mother and my relationship is paramount to my relationship with you. And the reality of the matter is, with 4 young children, if we didn't have bedtimes, you and I would never have time to connect together, because Jackson and Ryan would stay up all hours of the night
And it'd be fun because we'd get to hang out with them, right? And I'm being genuine. Like, Jackson loves playing board games. Andrea enjoys playing board games, but she does it, I think, mainly as a ministry to me. And I love that about her. That's not a knock. I'm just saying it would be easy for me to go, Jax, let's just stay up every night for a couple of hours and play video games or play board games. That'd be fun. That'd be great. It would come at the expense of my marriage. And part of our code is your and my relationship is paramount to my children. And so bedtimes for us, that's the difference. That's why that's not hypocritical, right? Because when I present it to our kids, it's presented as you go to bed so that your mom and I have time to spend together. And there are added benefits. You're not tired, you're not cranky the next day, all of those kinds of practical things. So, an example otherwise would be if part of your code is something like we want to limit technology, right? Because maybe you decide as a couple, hey, we really want to sew into each other. Well, if you're spending all of your time on your phone and your kids see that, they go, well, I thought part of our thing was that we don't spend a lot of time on technology.
Right.
And then if you are, then your kids go, well, what the heck? So point is that if you are holding your kids to a standard that you yourself are not living up to, or if you're trying to hold your spouse to a standard that you yourself are living up to, completely undermines establishing not just the structure, but really the underlying code in your family. Sure. So by way of review, first, talk with your family. Second, put your structure into place. Third, don't be a hypocrite. And fourth is...
check back. Check back. And when you are first putting this into practice, you're going to do this more often. However often you think that needs to be done. Of course, you don't want to be making huge changes to this all the time. But maybe it's, once a month you're checking back with your spouse and talking about, are there things that we need to be changing? How is this working for us? How are we doing with putting this into practice? So having those frequent times where you're checking back with each other and talking about it are so important for the vitality of this code for your family, the structure for your family, and keeping it going.
Right. So what are you thinking about when you do those checkbacks? Like, what does that look like practically?
Yeah. So talking about, hey, how do we think this works? Does it work for us? Are there things that we haven't thought about previously that we need to add in? Are there some things that we're doing, with structure or discipline or whatever that's outside of what we have written down and really don't matter? We're just doing it because, I don't know, we don't have really a reason. There's no intentionality to it. It just is kind of what we've done.
Sure.
Are there things we need to add or take away or change how we're doing them or change how it's written? So
yeah, I think this can come to your attention in a couple of ways, right? Because really we have two underlying things that we've talked about this month. We've got the code, right? Those 12, 13, 15, 20, whatever they are, active statements about what you're for as a family. Yep. Then you've got those the code translate into rules and structure, right? We eat dinner as a family. Right. We do these things, we don't do these things. Here are consequences for doing these things. So really there can be two ways that you do your revamping and your checking in. One, you might come to a place where you go, hey, this underlying code, I don't know that we believe that anymore, right? I mean, there certainly are things that you probably, if you've been married for some time, or even if you're not married or haven't been married, and you look back on your life and go, man, there were things I believed 10 years ago that I don't believe now, right? Either you've matured, or maybe you just, maybe your thoughts have changed on that. Maybe the Lord's changed your heart on something. So it could be that the underlying code changes, and that then flows through into your rules and the things that you do as a family that might be different. Right. Another thing may be that the rules and the structure aren't working for one reason or another. Right. I mean, it could be that, you made a decision as a family, hey, we're going to have a rule that we never miss church for any reason. Right. We do not miss church as a family. And that ties into your underlying code of putting Christ first. Well, it could be as your kids get older, they make a select sports team or they get competitive in another sport, and your desire is for them to be able to pursue that, but you also have this rule as a family that we don't miss church, and you may pray through that as a couple and go, you know what, we feel like the Lord's telling us it's important for us to pursue our child in this particular thing, and that we can change our rule to where we still are honoring the Lord and pursuing communion with other believers as a priority, but we can relax the rule of we're never going to miss church for any reason, right? That's just an example of something that's a real life thing that a lot of families deal with, because It's not like it used to be where select sports respect Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights.
Which is a bummer.
Right. So that's just an example. So it could be that the code changes, could be that the rules don't work, could be that you realize some of those rules don't tie into the code, or the rules we put in place, our kids are not understanding how those tie into the code. There's a disconnect, right? And so those things need to change. So yeah, I mean, that can happen frequently.
Yeah, but don't change things because they're hard.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a whole different thing, right? If you're changing something because your kids have complained about it a ton and you're tired of them complaining about it, or you and your spouse have complained about it a ton and you're tired of complaining about it, that isn't a reason to change it, for sure.
Right.
For sure.
And then once you hit a point where you feel like we don't need to be checking back so often, every month or whatever, I would strongly encourage you, though, to check back once a year. So we'll talk about this later in November or December, but do a year in review sort of thing where you're talking with your spouse about the year and you're planning for the next year and all that. And at that time is a great time to talk about your code and how you're operating, and maybe how things are changing with your family because some kids are getting older or you've introduced new kids, and maybe that changes things a little bit. So even if you're not doing the frequent checking back, doing it yearly is important.
Yeah, totally.
What's the next thing?
So the last thing that we want to talk about with regards to establishing structure in your family is really more of a reminder to you as the two leaders in the home, right? The matriarch and the patriarch, the ones that are going to lead the family, that parenting and leading our family, putting structure into our family, is not designed to be a sprint. It is designed to be a marathon.
Isn't that the truth?
And it will be super tempting to get to a point where you're like, I don't understand. We've set in place that for disobedience, you get, the rod of discipline, you get a spanking, and my son has had 14 spankings today, and he does not seem to have any understanding of what's going on. Maybe we need to change things, right? Where it's not hey, there's a disconnect between the rules and the code. It's more of I am just tired of continually dealing with these same things. I just want it to not be so difficult. And so, these next, few minutes before we close down the episode, we really just wanted to talk with you about a few things to just help you run the marathon well. Because, I don't know if you've ever run a marathon or not. I have not. I've run a half marathon, as did Andrea. And the thing you realize, even about running a half marathon, let alone running a full marathon, is it becomes about managing the things around you just as much as it is about managing yourself.
Sure.
Right? So, when you're running a half marathon, and certainly a full marathon, it's about managing what you're eating, managing what you're drinking, managing, what your pace, the things that are going on, the people that are around you that you're keeping up with or not keeping up with.
Having the right clothes on. And
exactly. It becomes about all of those things just as much as it is the physical running of the marathon. Right. And the same, I think, is true with regards to establishing structure in our home and keeping it over the long haul. It becomes just as much about the things that are going on around your home as it is having a code, having a structure, talking with your family, putting it into practice, not being a hypocrite and checking back and revamping as needed. All those internal things, it becomes just as important about those things that you have going on around you. So for me, one tip, and then we'll just kind of go back and forth, but for me, one tip is keep an inventory as a couple of who you have around you. It could be that the friends that you had in college and when you met and when you were newly married, that you need to perhaps reevaluate some of those relationships. Not because they're bad relationships, not because they're bad people, but it could be that they're in a different stage of life than you, right? You have a family, you're trying to establish structure and run that marathon well. Maybe they don't have any kids, they don't understand that, and they're just not pouring into you in that way. Now, does that mean you call them and tell them, hey, I don't want to hang out with you anymore? Well, no, but you evaluate who's supporting you in running this marathon that is parenting and doing family by God's design. And it could be that that particular couple is kind of like when you're training for the marathon, that friend that's like, hey, I know you are training for a marathon, but I would really love to go get nachos and sit around tonight. Is it wrong to go get nachos and sit around? No. I mean, that's great. I love nachos and I love sitting around. But you're training for a marathon, and skipping out on those training routines will cost you when it comes to running the marathon. You'll come up short. So reevaluating those relationships to find those good coaches, right, that can help push you. And in this case, I guess not coaches, maybe you'll talk about that, but those fellow runners, right, that rather than being a distraction, they're saying, hey, do you struggle with discipline? Because we're struggling with discipline. Can we get together and talk through that and maybe, swap sob stories, as families, and push each other to do this well. So number one thing for me on running the marathon, have a good support group.
Yeah, that's great. I think something that can help me to run that marathon is to constantly remember I'm not trying to look like someone else.
It's good.
Or now a lot of times I don't have so much struggle in that as much as maybe my kids do. So, well, why do we do, with their question of, well, why do we do it that way? Or my friend gets to do it this way. Or my friend gets to be on technology whenever they want, or any, all those sorts of things. And that can feel like pressure sometimes.
For sure.
To change things, and just constantly reminding our kids, we are not called to be that family. We're called to be us and our family, and these are the decisions that we're making because of what God's told us and how He's directed us to operate. And we are to be set apart from, quote, the world, and our lives should look different than the world. It should be different, and we're called to something different. So yeah, it's gonna be different, and it's gonna feel harder at times, but consistently talking to the kids about that and understanding with them, then
totally.
It's hard, and trying to empathize with them, but still standing having a hard stance of, this is what we believe. this is why we believe it, going back to the code and going back to scripture, and all that just consistently reinforces to them.
Yeah.
Totally. So that's some of like managing the outside.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then for me, the last thing that I would touch on is if you're going to do anything difficult, run a marathon, play a sport excellently, play an instrument excellently, it's great to have a good coach. Mm-hmm. And certainly we should be in constant prayer as husband and wife for our families, for guidance, for discernment with the ultimate coach, the Lord. But it also is helpful to have a couple in your life that is older, that is more further along in their family life. Maybe they have adult kids. If you have young kids, if you have adult kids, maybe they have grandkids, right? They're just a little bit further ahead in their parenting and in their family, leading their family than you are, that you can learn from, right? I mean, it's sort of that personal trainer that you have for your family. And, we've said this before, I'll say it again here. That is an intentional relationship. It's not that you sort of watch them from afar, right? That's a stalker. We're talking about mentoring, right? That close, intimate relationship where, you find that couple and ask them, hey, could we get together once a month, every couple months, and just hear from you on how you raised your family, or ask you some difficult questions that we have and see how you handled that. I would strongly encourage that. Maybe someone from your small group, if you're in one, somebody from your church, just somebody that believes the way you believe, and that you look at their family and go, man, I want our family to look like that.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is the obvious: feed your soul well.
Yeah.
So feed it with the Word of God, with prayer.
Yep.
Lots of time with God.
Yep.
And He'll sort all that out then.
Totally.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. So in review, once you come up with that code and translate that code into structure and rules for your family, talk about it with your family, put it into practice. Don't be a hypocrite. Check back and revamp that process as needed. And then remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Mm-hmm. So be intentional about those you have around you. Mm-hmm. Guys, thanks so much for joining us on Family Friday. Remember, 1 week from today, we will be answering your questions with regards to family structure. We've gotten a lot of questions already in and had some really good conversations going on over on our Facebook page. So I really appreciate those folks that got those questions in. Look forward to answering those 1 week from today. Guys, so this weekend we'll have the diary going up, then back at it with Marriage Monday and all the rest next week. Thanks so much for joining us. And remember, God is for your family. Have a great day.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Marriage by Design. If you were impacted by this video, like it by hitting the thumbs up below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and once you subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes release.
Excellent. Also, one of the huge pillars of our show is interactivity between us and you. So we would love you to comment down in the comments below if you have thoughts about this video, or if you have questions or other things you'd like to see considered in the future. In addition, if you'd like, you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram @marriagebydesignpodcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching Marriage by Design Podcast. Finally, if you want to, you can tweet at us. We do have a Twitter account that is @MarriageXDesign. Thanks, and have a great day.